Yep, we ranked the finales. It was fun. Y'all loved it, more than I expected. So we're going to be keeping these types of Winx videos on a roll for whatever topics I find interesting enough. Y'all know what you're here for, so let's just get this started, shall we? Asheron is perhaps the incarnation of wasted potential. A great design, a cool concept, and a solid build-up were all murdered by the fact that just about 15 minutes after he's set free, he is imprisoned in a Deus Ex Machina box following one of the lamest fights the show has ever given us. I think I called it Boxus Ex Machinas at some point, which is genius. And by genius, I mean I hate my life. The ultimate victim of Season 6's lackluster rushed finale is definitely the so-called big bad, to the point where the real villains of the finale are the tricks. Really, there isn't much to talk about with Asheron, because there's so little to him in the show to begin with. He's just another basic villain who will crush anyone in his way, and that is just so boring at this point. Like, what can we even say about him that we can't also say about Darkar, Valtor, or even Tristanus? Nothing. So let's just forget about the series' most forgettable villain now and move on. Oof, these two. Does anyone like these guys? Season 7 is already a mess, but Khalshara and Brafilius are a huge reason as to why. Brafilius is the most annoying type of comic relief villain imaginable. Usually when a villain like him sucks at his job, he at least wins you over by being the underdog. I swear to God, that was not an intentional pun. But Brafilius is not lovable in the slightest. He's obnoxious, and despite being forcibly dragged into Khalshara's plan, we aren't even given a reason to understand his dedication to her. You don't really see the love that he has for his sister until like the last few episodes when he literally is depending on her to save him. And this is made even worse by the fact that he's somehow the more threatening of the two, by which I mean he has more encounters with the Winx than his sister does. Brafilius has the Stone of Memories, meaning only he can go after them when they time travel. Khalshara, meanwhile, has no real presence. She spends hardly any time directly confronting the Winx, and even when she does, she's just some random shapeshifter that the Winx should be able to crush like a bug at this point, given all of the foes that they've defeated thus far. You're telling me that these heroes of the magical universe, who have defeated this universe's version of Satan, Valtor, the Black Circle, Tristanus, super lame-ass sorcerer guy, and the 3 fucking ancestral witches can be defeated by a bird.
I'm losing to a bird!
And that's another box ticked on the Be Like Lindsay Ellis Except Less Good list. It's a shame, because their designs are great, and them being focused on corrupting fairy animals and making an army of them seems rather unique. Like, imagine if all the fairy animals Khalshara captured were corrupted with wild magic, like the Kangor from episode 1, or I've just realized instead of Elos, I wrote Elsa. I put the script on Patreon already. No! Or Wild Magic Elos from episode 13. Oh, kill me. But real talk, I would kill for that. And it would certainly up Khalshara's threat level. But as it stands, these two buffoons should have gotten their asses kicked in episode 1. That's the real fucking tea, sis. That awkward moment the minion is a better antagonist than her master. Yeah, Selena's actually a pretty interesting villain, as what she lacks in raw power, she makes up for in cunning. Like, it is beyond refreshing to have a villain who does not make the tricks their minions, but rather pretends to be their protege only to use them towards their own ends. Plus, having Selena be Bloom's childhood best friend who wants vengeance is a great concept. However, the execution is, not what anyone wanted at all. Selena's fall to darkness has nothing to do with Bloom. Selena met Eldora and then pledged herself to Asheron completely outside of Bloom's awareness and influence, so any kind of envy Selena could have felt towards Bloom's magical abilities, thus leading her to becoming Asheron's lackey, is just non-existent. Selena's bitterness towards Bloom feels unearned, which sucks because it could have served as an interesting way to provide meta-commentary on the criticism Bloom's character has received as being a Mary Sue who makes everything about her. A critique which was honestly quite unmerited in the first 3 seasons, but has become incredibly relevant from season 4 onwards. Like the previous villains, Selena as a villain is a great concept, but her execution is meh. It's not bad like Khalshara, Brafilius, and Asheron, but it's also just barely passable. I mean, at least she's not annoying like some other villains prove to be. But even then, the fact that Selena hardly interacts with the Winx directly and leaves the job to her legendarium trash fodder monsters makes her incredibly dull and forgettable, just like her master. Obscurum is like a less awful Brafilius. Yes, he's similar in the fact that he's a comic relief minion of Valtor, but Obscurum's arrogance actually fits his character, and actually is quite endearing. Like when he tries to make his grand entrance to the Winx.
Really?
This is me as a villain. Though Obscurum is nothing special, he at least reads as somewhat competent, threatening, and enjoyable, and I appreciate that, especially when his arrogance just blows up in his face. And I also dig his backstory of being a corrupted Prince Argan, the jealous brother of Queen Durana. You know, when Durana bothers to remember she had a brother.
When Valtor showed up, my brother Argan suddenly disappeared.
Did you know that?
Wow, I think maybe Obscurum had a point in throwing a celestial coup. Oh, plus he's also totally got a crush on Valtor.
What did you have in mind for my coronation? A grand celebration, or maybe something a little more intimate? You, me, and some star yummies?
Again, it's scraps, and it's from him when he's a villain, but like, hashtag give Argan a boyfriend. If it weren't for Mystery of the Abyss, Politea would probably fall even below Asheron. Season 5 did her no favors whatsoever. No real backstory beyond retconning Daphne being killed, I mean, turned into a spirit. And no motivation for Politea, just randomly betraying Daphne only to be cursed as well. What the hell even? Thankfully, as much unashamedly recycled animation there may be in Mystery of the Abyss, it at least makes Politea a far more competent and interesting big bad than either the Trix or Tristanus. I kinda live for her stringing along the Trix in her scheme, and when she takes out Tristanus, it feels cathartic given how annoying he was through it all season 5, and how pointless he feels in this movie. Still, any personal vendetta she could have held against Bloom or Daphne is rendered moot, given that isn't even addressed in the movie. So really, Politea is another interesting concept for a villain that has at least a decent execution in this pointless movie, anyway. Mondragora is probably the least recognizable villain of the franchise. Yes, there are far more forgettable villains, but for whatever reason, most fans tend to glaze over Mondragora. Part of that's probably because she's overshadowed by the ancestral witches in the first movie, but I personally believe the main reason is because both English dubs ruined her. Like, dubbing brothers.
And I'll leave this cold prison of the Obsidian Circle, so I may seek out the source of all your pain.
And then her Nick voice just is not helping her cause whatsoever.
I will leave this cold prison of the Obsidian Circle and seek out the source of all your pain.
Both performances are so cheesy and melodramatic that they kill any threat Mondragora poses, which is a shame because honestly, she's one of the more sinister and ruthless villains of the franchise. She poisons and corrupts Riven to do her bidding, and he nearly kills Musa in the process. She devastates Althea in minutes with her army of horrific bug abominations, and she nearly chokes Bloom to death. Like, goddamn, Mondragora don't fuck around. So for those reasons, I figured she deserved a spot above the previous villains. If not for her unfortunate casting and direction, perhaps more people could appreciate Mondragora as a villain without wanting to gouge out their eardrums. You're probably wondering how Tristanus is not lower on the list. And that's largely because he's actually not that terrible a villain. Solid motivations, unique dynamic with Icy, and interesting powers and design that make him a pretty believable threat. Specifically in the Italian dub, he's a lot more intimidating.
Fate insignificanti, voi pensate di potermi fermare? Io sono qui per distruggervi.
Really, what killed him and made him annoying was his English voice.
Tristanus is so not. They'll be sorry. Very sorry.
Adam Wiley's a great voice actor, but the direction he was given to make Tristanus this whiny brat really kills any threat he might have otherwise posed. Still, not as bad as people make him out to be. As predictable as the plot may get, at least Tristanus sufficiently rose the stakes and made things personal with Aisha. Only for Bloom to steal that from her. No. We talked about that in the finale video. We're done. We're leaving that behind. Okay. Yep, at the very center of this list are the three bitches who started this whole mess. Belladonna, Listless, and Tharma. At least, those are their names according to the French dub. I think it's the French dub. It's something to do with the French version of the show, I'm pretty sure. The Ancestral Witches are classic villains whose legacy is one to reckon with. These three served the Shadow Phoenix, they inspired the Tricks, they destroyed Domino. There's almost no end to the list of terrible things that they've had a hand in. The presence these three possess probably makes them the most sinister villains of the franchise, especially when they appear to Bloom at the end of Season 3. Oddly, they're far more intimidating when they're just delivering a message. They won't actually try to hurt you unless it can serve their own purposes. Really, the big drawback to these three is that they're very lacking in characterization beyond being demonesses. Like, even though each of them corresponds to a particular member of the Tricks, they never really prove it, especially given they tended to swap which member of the Tricks they interact most with in Magical Adventure. For a long while, the Black Circle were my favorite villains, and the main reason for that was twofold. First, Ogron's a great villain. He tries to be charismatic like Valtor, but that facade is very easy to tear down, and when he's upset and his true colors appear, he can be incredibly frightening. Thank you, Terrence Scammell, for your terrifyingly fantastic performance.
The Wizards of the Black Circle don't know what repentance is! You'll realize this when you spend eternity in the abyss!
And the other reason being the amount of damage these villains did to Earth. The fact that they had captured all of the Earth Fairies, treated them terribly, and basically already won by the time the Winx even noticed what they were doing. Really, capturing Roxy would have only secured their already earned victory, given how terrible they made Earth indirectly. What really drags them down, though, are Ogron's powers and Ogron's fellow hunters. I love the idea of Ogron being able to absorb specific powers and turn them on his enemies, but I would have loved to see him explicitly wielding the Dragon Flame or the Winx's other spells and powers, instead of generic energy blasts. Dumon is fine in personality and especially powers, but Gantlos and Anakin are lame. Anakin especially. They're really lacking in terms of individual personality, and the fact Anakin's powers start and end at super speed, oh god, it really just makes him super underwhelming. Honestly, Darkar is probably the most underrated of the series' villains, which fits considering Season 2 is the most underrated season. Because he's a more distant, omnipresent threat, it makes sense why he's more comfortable hanging back in the Citadel, allowing the Winx to have more character-driven stories of their own, without having to constantly worry about where Darkar is and where he's about to strike. But beyond that, I absolutely love Darkar's presence, a lot of which has to do with the lore around him. He's the Shadow Phoenix, making him a dark counterpart to Bloom, whose appearance alone has been weakening her OP Dragon Flame over time, even making her question herself and her strength. Even his 4Kids lore of being a researcher who was corrupted by the Shadowfire power, something so strong it developed its own consciousness, is quite fire. Oh shit, another pun. And his design, can we just talk about how freaky he is in a kid's show meant primarily for girls? Like, he's a skeleton in a suit of armor that's the color of old, dried blood. He's got razor-sharp claws that could tear the flesh from your body in seconds, and his phoenix form looks like a corrupted version of that firebird most of us are familiar with. His silhouette alone is utterly terrifying, going well with his underground fortress that looks like this universe's version of hell. Perhaps the Fairies of Vengeance don't belong on this list considering they aren't really villains, but that's precisely what makes them fantastic antagonists. Unlike anyone else on this list, the terrestrial fairies believe that their cause is a righteous one. They were hunted and imprisoned for centuries before the Winx freed them, and once liberated, all they wanted was payback on the Black Circle for capturing them, and the humans for devastating their planet and no longer believing in them. Their motivation is by far and away the best among the antagonists, and each member provides a unique challenge to the Winx. I mean, who doesn't love each of the major fairies like Diana or Aurora? My only real complaints with them is that for Diana, I wish she had a one-on-one rivalry with Flora rather than Bloom, because everything must be Bloom-centric apparently. And Aurora just never did much, quite honestly. But I adore Morgana and especially Nebula as antagonists. It's interesting to see Nebula turn on her own queen and even commit a coup after the Day of Justice. To her, she has lost many more friends and fellow fairies to the Black Circle when she was correctly suspicious of them. It makes her desperation to seize control and kill the fairy hunters all the more not justified, but understandable. And that's the thing with the Fairies of Vengeance. You can't justify their actions, but you can completely empathize with them. And that is the key to how the Winx are able to win them over.
Just look around here. The chill, the despair. This is what Ogron and his wizards have in their hearts, but you're not like them. You're better than them, and now's your chance to prove it.
Now, this may surprise some of you given my track record of complaining about the Tricks, but really, that's pretty much just about their role in the show from Season 5 to Season 8. Season 8 did fare a little bit better in characterizing them, especially Icy with her new backstory, but for the most part, they became incredibly pathetic doing the same thing over and over and over and over. But back in the first 3 seasons, the Tricks were far better. They were at their peak back in Season 1 when they were their own masters, pursuing the Dragon Flame and awakening the Army of Darkness. I talked about this at length in my video ranking the season finales, but suffice to say, the Tricks being drunk on power makes for great content. But even in Season 2, with them as Darkar's minions, they still managed to pose a threat with their Glue Mix power-ups, crushing the Winx easily in every battle. They became far less intimidating and even had a diminished presence in Season 3, but they still managed to prove compelling as they bickered over Valtor's attention, only to realize, oh, we made a mistake. Really, the Tricks are the most recognizable, iconic villains of the series. The only reason Rainbow keeps relying on them is because of the weight that they carry in terms of legacy. And while those efforts have proven to fail again, and again, and again, and again, I still have to respect the Tricks' roots. There's a reason why these 3 witches are the first villains on every Winx fan's minds. To absolutely no one's surprise, Valtor reigns supreme. Not Season 8 Valtor. Oh god, no. Season 8 Valtor is a shadow of his former self. Season 3 Valtor is charming and sophisticated, all to cover up the power-hungry monster he truly is. He may not hold the same presence as Darkar, but he more than makes up for that in his ruthlessness and directness in achieving his goals. Unlike Darkar, Valtor had no qualms in getting his own hands dirty. He goes to worlds himself to steal their powers, even challenging their rulers, including Aisha. He leaves the magical universe devastated as he grows more and more powerful, even spreading his influence by recruiting the help of Cassandra and Chimera to bewitch King Radius, and helping Diospro in corrupting Prince Sky. This also ties into him making his attacks on the Winx personal. Not even just Bloom, with whom he shares a connection through the Dragon Flame. He challenges Aisha directly and blinds her after ruining her homeworld. He destroys Stella's connection with her father, and basically has her title as princess torn away. He indirectly nearly kills Tecna by letting the Omega Portal go out of control. No villain before or after him has truly raised the stakes in this way for the Winx. So, yeah, there you go. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, and you want to see more content like this from me, then be sure to subscribe and ring that bell for notifications because YouTube hates creators. Also, please consider, if you're willing and able, pledging your support over on Patreon for myself and the channel. Perks include early access to videos and video scripts, along with access to the private Union of War Discord server for just $1 a month. I'm the Unicorn of War, and Asheron who? Khalshara who? Does she even go here?